there are so many people who are so very talented and work so very hard, and the luck piece does come in. Everybody I know who's successful, they have some sort of lucky break story, and this just so happened to be mine.
Hi, I'm Sali Christensen, the founder and CEO of Argent, a women's workwear brand. And this is Work Friends, a podcast for those who take their work, but not always themselves, seriously. Work Friends. Today's guest is Malika Andrews, host of ESPN's NBA Today and NBA Countdown. Anyone who knows me will tell you that I am a massive NBA fan. Therefore, Malika's been on my radar for quite some time, and she is a fixture on our television at home. Fortunately, I have had the pleasure of getting to know her over the past few years. In addition to admiring her personally, professionally, Malika stands out in a league all her own. Among her incredible career achievements, in 2018, she was named one of the youngest ever sideline broadcast reporters. In 2021, she was the youngest person to host the NBA Finals trophy ceremony. And in 2022, she was the first woman to host the NBA draft on ESPN. And she won an Emmy that year to boot. Now, age really is just a number, but it is worth mentioning that Malika's achieved all of this while under the age of 30. Her meteoric rise is certainly not all highlights, so we're going to dive into the ups and downs in this episode. With nothing further, I'm very excited to welcome Malika Andrews. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so excited you're here. We were just catching up, but I haven't seen you in too long. And I love and hate the fact that we're doing it recorded. So after
this could be very dangerous. This is just going to continue to unravel as our catch up as we forget that the cameras are rolling. But this is going to be fun. I'm really honored to be here. I really am.
Oh, I love you. I am so excited. And I just want to start by telling you that when I talk about the Argent woman, I think of you every time because I had the opportunity to come and be on set with you one day and you were wearing Argent and I just got to watch you and how good you are at your job and how in between takes on live television, you can shoot off a text message, you can accomplish 100 side tasks. And it was such a joy though. It's always so much fun to have a front row seat to cool jobs. And it's no secret to anyone that knows me that the NBA is my favorite thing on the planet.
Yes.
Sports generally, but the NBA
yes.
specifically.
Basketball.
So that's, I imagine, going to come up a lot.
My favorite part of when you were on set was just having you in our space. But the fact that Richard Jefferson was on the show with us, Richard, of course, an NBA vet, an NBA champion, now an analyst for ESPN. Richard was on set and you had said to me, Malika, I met Richard at like a college party a long time ago.
Las Vegas.
And in Las Vegas, and you had a photo of you and Richard circa
2007.
Circa 2007, looking every bit of 2007. And we brought the photo to Richard, and Richard's like, "Oh, we need to take another photo." And Richard, like, of course, is wearing a double-breasted suit with no shirt underneath, and is like making sure that he shows everything just for the amazing. And then he's, of course, is now like, oh, and when's Argent going to open a men's line? Yes. Richard's like, okay, Rich.
Anytime I meet an NBA player, I lose my cool entirely. He was one of the first that I ever met. And then he played for the Warriors when I moved to the Bay Area. Mm-hmm. So to have that full circle moment was really a treat.
Love that. That was one of my favorite parts of when you came to visit.
20 years later. Okay, so we really already had icebreakers, but we are going to start with an icebreaker.
Okay, I love it.
No matter where you are in your career, you're always learning. And so a question that I like to kick off these interviews with is, what's the last thing that you Googled for your job?
The last thing that I Googled for my job was probably something like directions, like how do I get somewhere? Because I am forever reliant on the GPS and overly reliant to the point that I need to put it in to like go home from the office still because I like to know exactly how much time it's going to take me to get there because I'm a little bit of a type A personality like that.
Which we love.
Yeah.
Same. To my detriment, I'm always relying on Google Maps and then I just look up like in New York City. You really should think, before you trust the map.
Yeah.
I'll walk in the wrong direction that was so obviously the wrong direction.
I saw something one time that said that getting out of a subway and waiting for your directions to buffer is like being a character in the video game Sims where you end up like walking in a circle and like going like back and forth. And I was like, it's me. That is me.
That was me this morning running away from
Yep,
the
where we're supposed
podcast
to go.
studio. Yep. Okay, biggest oh no moment this week. So I'd love to hear about really anything that went wrong and how you handled it.
This is embarrassing.
I hope it was on live TV.
Well, so that's the thing about television is that cameras are always rolling at some point. And I'm trying to make a specific effort to drink more water. I don't drink water. I'm a camel. I need to finish this by the end of our podcast. Otherwise, I have failed my duties as being a hydrated woman. Add that to the to-do list of all the other things we're doing. So I put my water bottle that I'm trying to drink my water into my bag, and I'm a schlepper. So I'm carrying my change of clothes bag, and I'm carrying my work bag, and I'm carrying my purse, and I'm carrying my riding clothes because I love riding horses. And the water bottle was open just a little bit. And of course, it spills all over the bag. So I put down all of my stuff on the floor, and I pull out the extra pair of socks that I had in the bag, and I wring them out as the water like drips out of the socks. Well, lo and behold, my wonderful, amazing staff is watching all of this on these security footage cameras and decides to put that on television of me wringing out my socks. Water dripping everywhere, just me like crouched on the ground like a gremlin, like trying to get my life together. And I said, you know what? You have to have a good sense of humor and be able to laugh at yourself when you're on NBA Today, because the cameras are always rolling, even if it's security footage. It was so embarrassing. Sally.
It's so good though. Oh, it's so good.
So embarrassing.
Also, we have all been there for what it's worth. All I do is dump things into my bag. I half close every bottle that I'm drinking out, my kombucha bottle, my water bottle, and it's inevitable.
Well, if I finished the water, then I wouldn't have that problem. So I guess that's
we all aspire to drinking more water. Okay, so I am excited to hear about where your love of sports came from and what growing up was like. And I can speak to my love for the NBA, which started at the age of maybe 5 or 6.
Yep.
It was in the era of Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen on the Bulls. And I grew up on a farm with no cable. We had 3,
I love that about you.
Channels.
I really do. I really do love that about you.
So I grew up playing with an older brother and also grew up watching these guys on television and would sit. I mean, everyone in the house would be asleep and I'd sit in the dark in front of the TV until like 11:30 p.m. watching these games and completely fell in love with it. And we didn't have a team in South Carolina, so I didn't even know that going to a game was possible. Right. That's the backstory on my love affair, but where does yours come from?
No, I have a similarity in terms of the staying up late to watch games. So my dad, Mike, is a personal trainer, loves everything sports, and my mom does too. But really, it was my dad. I grew up in Oakland in the Bay Area watching the Golden State Warriors. And at the time, the Golden State Warriors were not a good basketball team. They were really struggling, sort of bottom dwellers in the league. And some kids nowadays, what time do your kids go to bed? Like, what's bedtime?
Oh my gosh, that's a triggering question because last night Ruth fell asleep at 10:30, but typically 8:30.
All right, so it was like 8:30 is bedtime. There are no ifs, ands, or buts around it. When I was a kid, I go to bed, like peek out, like, hey, mom and dad. No, 8:30. It's past 8:30. What are you doing up? It was 8:30 bedtime. But if the Golden State Warriors were on, and my dad would be up watching the Golden State Warriors, and I asked to stay up late and watch the game with him. And this was always a negotiation, right? Like I had to come and present evidence as to why I'm older than Kendra, so my little sister, so I deserve to be able to be up 15 to 30 minutes after she does. And that extended when the Warriors were playing. And so my dad would let me stay up and watch the end of these Golden State games with him. And I loved it because I loved to get to be able to stay up a little bit later and feel like kind of grown up. And I loved spending that time with my dad, but I hated watching him watch them lose because in my young mind, I perceived that as my dad being sad. And my dad being upset that this team couldn't get it together. And why was my dad, like my dad is the most stoic, strong. And so to see him, oh, well, Miki, there they go again, losing another game. I was like, why can't these guys get it together for my dad? So when anyone asks me now, who do you root for? Who's your team? It is still to this day, it's my dad's happiness. Like I want my dad to be happy. So when the Warriors win, my dad is happy. And so that is where my rooting alliances lie.
He had some good years.
He had some great years. And it will be very interesting to see how long those years continue to peter and continue and they hang on to the embers of the dynasty. But they may be slowly dwindling.
I know. It's a rapid evolution, I feel like, with those entities, you know?
Yeah, I was super teams. You saw it with the Bulls.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And then your background in journalism's in print and newspapers,
Yes.
starting from your days at the University of Portland.
That's right.
So where did that interest come from?
When I got to the University of Portland, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I get so many calls from students now. I get emails, and I try to respond to as many of them as I can, because I remember being that student. And I get these emails from these wonderful students who are doing all the right things. I'm a freshman and I'm working for my school paper, and I have an internship here, and I volunteer here, and I'm doing all of the right things. I didn't know going into university that I wanted to go into journalism. I always loved to write. I always loved to listen to other people's stories. And I was curious about how we could continue to bring truth to light and keep authority checked. I always found all of that to be fascinating, but I never saw the Rubik's Cube come together as, oh, journalism is sort of what does this, as sort of the checks and balances of the powers of society. And so getting to the University of Portland, honestly, I have a best friend. Her name is Claire Duffy. She worked for the school paper. I admired the daylight out of her. And I thought, she worked for the school paper. And I thought, you know what? I want to get involved with an extracurricular. I want to spend more time around this supernova of a woman. And I get to write too. And so that was sort of my first foray into journalism, was really wanting to spend more time and explore in this space with a friend of mine. And so I did. And I fell in love very, very quickly and wrote stories where I saw writing that the university needed to do something, and listening to experts say that and me writing it and then seeing those tweaks and changes be made was a pretty empowering thing that I just said, you know what, I really can see myself doing this for a long time.
I mean, I feel like that really captures the experience of picking a major, though, where
Right.
you're like, my friend's doing it. Uh-huh.
Less math. I got it.
Yeah, it was the same for me, where you're like, I don't know. It's such a young age to decide.
And there's more and more pressure now to get it right immediately. And so what I try to tell those students, and it's a lot of young women who email me who want to get it right the first time, I try to remind them, knowing that I also didn't take this advice when I reached out. I wanted to know now, because I'm an anxious person who needs the certainty that everything is going to be okay. I try to remind them with the kindness of knowing that I wouldn't have taken this advice, but I'm going to give you the advice that I got anyway. And now with hindsight, I can see why it was valuable. It's okay to play. It's okay to explore. It's okay not to do exactly the thing that you want to do right out of the gate, and maybe try a couple of things. All of that is okay. We're in this place now where you feel like you see people getting it right and perceive that it's the first time they do it. And maybe it is and maybe it's not. But you have to sit in what's right for you. And that's something that for me came with a little bit of time. I didn't do any journalism my freshman year. It was my sophomore year that I started. And I didn't know that television was where I would end up. I really loved print. I really wanted to continue being a print reporter. And honestly, Sally, I don't know how you feel about this, but I felt really good at it. And I felt strong in walking to a room with a pen and paper, and armed with that to tell other people's stories was very comfortable for me. And pushing into television, it was a little bit uncomfortable, particularly at the beginning. And I'm sure you've had that experience where it's like, oh, wait, this is the armor I'm comfortable in. And now you're asking me to go into this new or this same room without that armor. And it feels very vulnerable and different.
First of all, I'll say that your advice is spot on. And there's a book that I read called Excellent Sheep that talks about—
I heard about this.
It's the pressure that young people are under to get it right. And they're aspiring to a really specific thing and a really specific resume. And it is truly the worst thing you can do to yourself, because you land in the consulting job, or you get your doctorate and whatever, and then you're unhappy because you haven't pursued your passion and you haven't allowed room for learning. Some of my growth came from waiting tables and taking on like hourly jobs and just working and hustling and learning work ethic from that,
Yes.
learning about myself and learning about people. And I think that is a bit of an afterthought right now for students. And I think they're feeling pressured to like immediately succeed because they look to your career and they think, oh, it was so easy and she's so great and I want to be that. And so, I think that a lot of times it's hard to see what happens behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And there's so much learning in the failure and in the exploration.
100%. And it's sometimes I want to remind folks, I'm 29 years old. I'm so lucky. I've been sprinkled with so much luck and so many wonderful people around me in my life to help me to get to where I am and to believe in me more than I believed in myself in order to be able to have the time and space to grow in the roles that I have. That being said, I feel it when someone says to me, well, I just want to do what you do and you made it look easy. And I appreciate that is a compliment. And I don't want to be the reason that somebody beats themselves up for not getting somewhere right out the gate immediately. Because from the outside looking in, I understand how that perception can be there. To your point, there were so many late nights, hard work, jobs I didn't get, internships I was rejected from, no's that later maybe turned into yeses, but some of them just stayed no's. And that isn't always seen, particularly in this highlight culture that we live in now. So I have so much empathy for young women in particular, where that is the path that they are trying to walk. But I also try to remind myself, how lucky are we that we have these get-to jobs instead of have-to jobs, that we get to explore, that we get to play, that we get to work in sports or fashion or in the business of creating a network of women, which is what you and Argent have done. Like that's just such a lucky place to be. And I have a family friend who is just saying, we are the lucky ones. And I truly feel that way about what we've been able to, what I've been able to. But I say we because it's so many people, to allow anyone to kind of reach that dream job, whatever it may be.
I think pursuing passion, because yours is so rooted in passion, is really the takeaway, and not ignoring that in pursuit of what's right or what's ideal. Because, there's so many jobs that we don't know of. We had Betsy Beers on,
who's one of my favorite people. We went to her house for dinner. And I have to leave. I can't just move every in time. Here.
Yeah. Are you sure you don't want me to stick around?
I can stay. Don't worry about it.
But she very
superhero
famously did not even know that the job that she has had such success with as an executive producer of Shondaland even existed, and she wanted to be an actor. And so I think there are a lot of stories like that where it's, pursue your passion and it will all work out. Allow yourself failure, be kind to yourself, etc. And I think it's also the thing that you mentioned that I think is worth highlighting is how necessary it is to be uncomfortable in order to achieve what you're not even envisioning for your career. Because live television was not something, that was on
not
your radar.
All. Really, not at all.
And then the last thing, speaking to your time at University of Portland, you got on the radar of a legendary sports journalist, Adrian Wojnarowski.
Nailed it.
Woj. For those who aren't closely following sports, Woj is the one that breaks all
everything.
NBA news, all sports news, really. The man doesn't sleep.
No.
But you got on his radar through the work you did in college, which is incredible. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So Woj, I had written a story. Terry Porter had just been hired as the head coach of the University of Portland men's basketball team. And Terry Porter had a rich history with Portland basketball. He was on the Portland Trailblazers team that made it to the NBA Finals. You'll remember the Michael Jordan years, the stopper of those championship aspirations. But he was beloved in the Portland area. And so he was hired as a head coach at UP, and that was a big deal. And so I'd written a story for The Beacon, and it was a front page profile on him and his family and coming to the university. And it's a story I still really love because, yes, I still reread some things. And I'm like, oh, I wish I wrote that differently. But I still really love that story. And Woj, I guess, had come to campus. It was at the beginning of his podcast. And he'd come to campus to do a podcast with Terry Porter. And he's a old school newspaper journalist. He picks up the college paper that he sees on campus and he puts it in his backpack and goes off to do the rest of his day, week, whatever. And that week was also Nike Hoop Summit. And I had gotten a credential to go to Nike Hoop Summit, where the young high school phenoms sort of put on a show, and Woj was there. And I saw him and I wanted to go introduce myself to him. And I had no idea any of this background with the Terry Porter story. And I walked up to him and I said, "I am Mr. Wojnarowski. My name is Malika Andrews." Like, I'm so sweaty, so nervous to introduce myself to this living legend, and who he would hate if he knew that I called him that. When he hears this, he's going to be like, "Why'd you say I'm a living legend?" He is. I introduced myself to him and he said, "Oh, wait, I know you. Didn't you write this story on Terry Porter?" And when I tell you my mind was blown to realize that something that I had written, something that so many people, sports sometimes gets discounted as the toy department of the journalism industry, that something I had written had expanded beyond our little campus walls into the zeitgeist enough that someone that I admired that much was able to see, respect, and recognize my work meant more to me than I would ever be able to put into words. And he's become a mentor of mine since, championing me. He's in rooms I'm not in, and he has been that champion for me. So to know that it started, sometimes, what's your brand, I think, is something that's asked a lot these days. What's your brand? How do you build your brand is a question I get a lot. I really think good work, hard work is a brand that extends beyond you. That was the original building your brand was, are you kind? Do you work hard? Are you good at what you do? And that was a time where I just felt validated that maybe if my work is catching the eye of Woj, then it has validity in the world. And that was a really cool feeling, a gift that he gave me.
It also takes courage to approach. And I think that a lot of women don't.
Yeah, maybe.
And I think the fact that you took that, because that conversation could have not happened and you both could have gone your separate ways. And I think the fact that you engage, I mean, good on both of you, to be honest.
I feel myself as being like, "Oh, no, but like, I'll take that. Yeah, thank you."
Yeah, 100%. And I think that there are so many people like him and now like you and me who want to nurture talent. You've spoken to it earlier in this conversation even. And we want to be resources for the next generation that's coming up because we know the hurdles that they're up against, and ideally we can help them overcome some of them, you know, or make them feel okay and that we've all been there.
100%.
So I just think that reassurance. And so Woj has obviously been a mentor and continues to be a mentor. How important has it been to have mentors in the field of sports, male dominated? And are there any other relationships that have been instrumental for you?
Absolutely. It's been invaluable. The network of the people that that will champion you. And I think that's in any industry, right? I don't think that's specific to sports, but certainly there's a sisterhood within sports that is so important to me and has become even more important as I've gotten older. But a mutual fangirl moment that I know we have is over Doris Burke. I just think that she embodies excellence. The woman is excellent at everything that she sets out to do. She is prepared. She is poised. She is ready for the moment. She became the first woman to call any men's major sports finals in the United States this year when she called the NBA finals. And I remember I tossed to her because NBA Countdown, which I host, is right before you toss over to game. And I had the distinct honor of saying, and now it's time for tip-off between, the Boston Celtics and Mike Breen, Lisa Salters, JJ Redick. And for the first time ever, and I got emotional in a way that I didn't expect to. Just saying that, not visibly, but I felt it just because of what she represents to so many of us in the face of so much. I have endless admiration and respect. And also that respect includes now finding my own place and all of us finding our own place in helping to be a building block on what she has helped to continue to make here for women in sports. She is just, I can't say enough good things about Doris Burke.
Same. And to your point earlier about personal brand, she is kind. She is humble. It's just so unassuming, like how much she's accomplished and how influential she's been inside of sports and outside of sports.
Yeah.
I mean, she's so iconic. I actually vividly remember first seeing you announce this exact moment you're talking about. I was watching it. I was on the subway and I was crying. It was one of the only moments in Argent's history that a moment has hit me real time. She was wearing Argent for this moment.
I remember.
I like tear up even talking about it now.
What she was wearing, yep.
Yes, and to be part of moments like that is really surreal, and the pace at which we're both moving, you're not able, I think, sometimes to absorb it real time, and that one really hit me.
Me too.
Yeah, I love that woman. And I know that she I know from conversations with her how much she admires and respects you too, and it's beautiful. I think that's, again, highlights that people want to pay their success forward, the good ones, and they want to see the next generation have more success. She's opened a door now for more women to come through, and you're doing the same thing. So let's jump forward to ESPN. So how did you get there? I know there were some steps in between, some no's that you talked about.
Yeah, so ESPN was my first. I started at ESPN as a writer, and it comes back to that mentorship piece. Adrian was a big part of that. When a job opened based in Chicago, and I had just moved to Chicago at the time, I was at the Chicago Tribune, and I was writing, primarily covering the Chicago Bulls. When that job opened up, he and Mark Spears vocally recommended me to fill it. And so I went through a series of the car wash, as we call it, interviews, and I started as the Midwest-based writer for ESPN, and that was 5 years ago now. So I loved everything about that job. It was right when sort of Giannis was the skyrocketing up and up, his first MVP season, and I got to kind of cover that every day. The Bulls were struggling a bit, so I ended up spending most of my time in Milwaukee, which was very, very interesting. And yeah, I loved covering that team. I loved covering teams. I like talking to people, being on the ground with players, seeing them pour into their craft every single day is really awesome. It's not something that gets old.
You stepped into being one of the youngest ever sideline reporters. That was the first sort of on-camera experience that you had. Did you ever, or even now, do you ever experience imposter syndrome?
Girl, please. Yeah, for sure. I experience imposter syndrome. For me, it's not just walking into a space and saying, what am I doing here? It's walking into a space and saying, what is my purpose here? And trying to find that while I'm trying to find myself, and that was a really interesting experience for me. I started at ESPN when I was 22. I did that trophy ceremony, the youngest that you're alluding to, when I was 25. And that's a time when you're still learning who you are. And you're learning who you are while everyone else is learning who you are and has their opinions of you as well. And while you're trying to sort of sort your way through who am I as an adult person? And so asking myself all of these questions while I saw all of this greatness around me, and assigning it just like you said that folks look at me and say, well, maybe you got there. I assigned that same thing to others. How is this so effortless? And when I feel like I'm just sweating through every blazer that I put on and I don't know, I'm trying to find my footing like a baby deer in all of this. So 100% I experienced, and I still experience imposter syndrome.
I mean, I think just that honesty, though, is invaluable because we all experience it, and talking about it and awareness of that is the great unlock.
Yeah.
Awareness that we're all going through that. Even the most successful people are going through that in some capacity at some point.
Yeah.
It allows you to just keep going, though, I think, and keep,
for sure,
charting new territory.
The hardest part for me in terms of walking into a room and wondering if I belonged was reminding myself to be kind to myself through it all. Because if you're not being kind to yourself, then you can't be kind and have that grace with other people. And sometimes it's easy to walk into a room full of wonderful people in an industry and look around and say, oh my goodness, I don't belong here. And then when you get down on yourself, then you somehow find yourself putting yourself within this context of lesser or more than everybody around you. And that just isn't a winning recipe. That's not a recipe to be happy. That's not a recipe to be at peace. And so that's something that I found myself having to contend with is how can I give myself the grace to be learning and to maybe feel a little bit like I am still finding my way without being unkind to myself and in turn needing to stack myself up against other people and maybe asserting some of that unkindness onto others as well. And I think as women, that's where our responsibility lies in terms of there are so many outside patriarchal expectations of there can only be one. And I'm not going to say that isn't true because there are plenty of times I enter a room and I look around and I say, oh, it's just me in here. It would be easy to continue that as the norm because that's what we're told is available to us. But how can we change that? It's not on us. It's not on the oppressed to change oppression. However, we have a choice in order to how to push things forward, change that conversation, and make things a little bit different. So for me, the reminder whenever I'm feeling a little bit less than is how do I lead with kindness to myself? Because when I can lead with kindness to myself, then that means that kindness will sort of emanate throughout all of these conversations. And that's something that I have to remind myself because my tendency is to get down on myself and be a little bit like, no, you can't. And look at all the people who can. And so I'm working on that. It's an active thing for me. It's not a this happened and now I'm through it and I look at everything as this shining bright. No, it's something that I'm still kind of working on a little bit.
Yes. My dad gave me such a gift when I was young. He said, you have to make sure that you take care of yourself first before you can have like a meaningful impact on anyone else's
Can't pour from
life.
an empty cup.
Exactly. I think that highlights that. And that is something everyone has to work on. And your rise has been meteoric. It has been. And I think that
just means it's fast.
It's so exciting to watch. And it represents something to so many women inside and outside of your industry. And I think that the gift that the generation above us, the Doris Burkes of the world, have given us is that they really had to operate in this scarcity mindset. It was almost said to them, there's one seat for a woman. And so fight it out amongst yourselves.
Yep.
And now I feel like the shift is this mindset of abundance where it's like, oh, we bring new perspective, we bring balance, we bring a better outcome.
Absolutely.
And so I think that you're showing the female perspective and the power, the energy around women in sports now.
I love it.
Me too.
I love it. I love it so much. And I think it's important to remember that we have been handed this garden that's been tended to. So if we abandon all of the things that a Doris Burke, for instance, has sort of helped lay the groundwork for, then don't water it, then it can turn brown again. But we have to sort of continue to pour into it, which is one of the things working on MBA today gives me so much joy. I sit next to one of our lead analysts is a woman in Chinea Gumake. Our head producer, our CP, Hillary Guy, is a woman who you and I both adore Hillary. Like, I love that woman. Ramona Shelburne, one of our senior writers, the only senior writer that is a woman, is a regular on our show. And so to have this sort of cacophony of voices of different perspectives on MBA Today, on a show that we have WNBA Today within our show, but it is oftentimes a male-dominated space. To see all of this diversity of perspective is something that's really special to me and makes me look forward to coming to work every day.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I also think you just did something that I have seen you do a lot of times. You're always platforming and spotlighting people that aren't necessarily in front of the camera.
Our director, Kathy, literally the perspective of our show, what you see on television is what a woman sees. It is what Kathy directs.
Yes.
Who's retiring. Shout out, Kathy. But that's something that's really, it's cool and it's unique. And it's something that we really work to bolster on our show.
Yeah. It's beautiful though I think that you're thinking of the entire team too. So I think just like giving them a shout out is very nice. So I think the question I want to ask though around, protecting yourself and at a time where your career really is just a rocket ship, how do you balance building a personal brand and managing your job and protecting your mental health and well-being?
I'm going to start by saying I don't do it perfectly. And there are days that I'm just like, wow, what is happening right now? And so practicing a little bit of forgiveness during those days, I think, is very important because sometimes sometimes it feels like being asked to add, did you take care of yourself today to the checklist? And when you don't, beating yourself up isn't going to help. But the most helpful metaphor that I've ever heard about this that I borrow often is that we're all always juggling. You're always juggling, and some of the balls you're juggling are glass, and some of the balls you're juggling are plastic. And it might change, by the way, on any given day, what is a plastic ball and what is a glass ball. Some days work is glass, and that's okay. It is okay if you have a project at work that you absolutely cannot drop because the glass balls, when they drop, they will shatter. It's okay if your family is glass some days. By the way, it's okay if you have done X, Y, and Z family thing over the course of a week. If your family thing today is plastic, I think sometimes we are told to be ashamed of that. It's okay. Only you can make that kind of calculation of how you're juggling any given day. But know that the plastic balls can afford to be dropped. They can. They'll bounce, you'll pick them back up, and they will still be there intact. The glass balls you have to nurture and care and look at with a little bit more tenderness. And so that's kind of what I'm constantly evaluating, is which balls are which on any given day, and it changes. But I drop something every day. Every day I drop something, and I try more and more to be dropping things that I can pick back up and continue to juggle well and not feel bad, crushingly bad on the days that I don't nail it, because you're not going to every single time.
That was going into parenting. The one gift that I gave myself was like, there's no room for guilt. So I think that speaks to that, which is like, it's self-inflicted and it's unnecessary and unproductive. So how do you minimize doing that to yourself? It's just unhelpful. It's a distraction. It slows things down. And then it's also, what do I need to do every day to make sure that I'm like fully present and taking care of myself? These are the things that I'm not doing. Like working out every day is what I should be doing. I'm working on it though. But I know that when I do, it's a better day for me.
Yep.
So I think that awareness is also something that I'm working on.
It's
but
a process,
it's
right?
A process.
Like it's a process. I don't know how you do it. I really don't know how you do it with children as well.
It is, the
yes,
good days
I don't,
and bad
and that's
days.
the point. And that's why I am like, yeah, you know what? More power to you.
Okay, shifting back to stepping into rooms where you are the only woman. Let's talk about going into the bubble. The NBA bubble. You were there for 107 days.
What a time.
What a time.
What a time. Like it's kind of this, it's kind of wild to think back on. And whenever it's sort of a touchstone I have with players that if you had to be there.
I imagine it's something like going to camp though, where you just like bond with these people that you're just sort of and what was happening in the world.
Yeah.
The NBA figuring this setup out benefited a lot of people that are NBA fans and were craving just sports.
So I don't want to minimize that part, because so what the bubble was, for anybody who isn't in it like Sali watching Golden State every night. The NBA during the COVID shutdown, the NBA, I really believe that the NBA was a catalyst in the world taking COVID, or the United States rather, taking COVID as seriously as it did when it did, because the NBA shut down. And then the next day we saw from the top down top sports figures, commissioners on the phone with the then president, and all of these conversations about safety being had after one of the NBA players tested positive for COVID. The NBA then restarted their season in what we termed the bubble, which was a campus in Florida that was closed campus, and there was testing every single day to ensure that a protective COVID-free bubble existed where players could play basketball, a contact, sweaty sport, without masks on. So a couple of reporters were sent down there, just a handful, a dozen reporters. And myself and another reporter, Chris Haynes, were sort of the first two that were sent down, and the reporters who stayed for the 107-day duration, the only people who stayed that long, along with my wonderful producer, Melinda Adams, and his wonderful producer, Jonathan Scott. And so we were down there for this experiment, essentially, that in hindsight, I do remember it as more of we got to have communal dinners when nobody else in the world seemingly could. But there was a level of fear and anxiety in going down there, in leaving my cocoon of a New York City apartment, of getting on an airplane, of going down to experience something that we weren't sure was going to work. We didn't know if using testing every day, if there wouldn't be a COVID case in the bubble would, just as we deemed it, pop, right? And so going into that, I had no idea that it was going to be successful and everything was going to be okay. And so there was a nervousness that in hindsight, it's like, okay, this was a lot of fun. And it helped my career immensely because I was one of the few people in there. For context, ESPN sends 200, 300 people to the NBA finals, all inclusive when you're talking about people who are laying cable and producing and camera operators and on television, et cetera, et cetera. There were 7 of us in the NBA bubble doing the jobs or attempting to, because it proved why all of these folks are so essential, of that army of people. And so the gift that gave me was trying on all of these different hats as a sideline reporter, as a news reporter, as being an instant expert in coronavirus, as certainly covering basketball, as covering civil unrest, as we were covering how players reacted to the shootings of Black men across America, which was acute, and players felt that deeply at the time. And frankly, as a Black woman, so did I. And so it was sort of this on-the-ground experience of reporting that I don't think that it hasn't happened before and hasn't happened since.
What's your calculation going into from a career perspective? Like, this is a huge opportunity to be one of the people selected to go in. Did you have to weigh that at all, or was it?
Yes, I was very nervous. And then I did what every grown-ass woman does when she's faced with a crazy decision and she has the ability to. I called my mommy. And I said, Mom, what do you think I should do here? And she said, well, there's a lot of risks and we don't know much about this disease and you're not vaccinated because there was not a vaccine at that point. And so, but I know you. And I know that when there is a story that is documenting history, you want to be there. And so why are you asking me this question? I know you're going to go.
Go, Mom.
And she was right.
And how did that shape, and you touched on how good it was for your career, how did it shape your career coming out of the bubble? Because it was largely successful in terms of looking at your role and all you were able to achieve over a long period of time.
Yeah, it was. I'm so grateful that so many people poured into me and thought that I could try on these different hats and allowed me to keep playing with them after. I was able to continue to report from the sidelines and was added to game broadcasts. And eventually that sort of culminated in being the reporter on the NBA Finals in 2021. I got to play, as I said, in terms of trying on all of these hats during a serious time, during a scary time. But I really felt purpose when I was in the bubble. I really felt that it touched on everything that was important to me, which was covering the events of what's happening in the world, getting to play in sports, being able to shed light on the social injustice that was happening around the world, which was something that was and continues to be still very important. That was a really awesome, and I mean it in the true Oxford Dictionary sense of the word, experience.
Yeah, I feel like it really showcased your versatility and I think the work ethic.
That's where it goes back to the luck piece. So many people work hard. So many people are incredibly talented. I am blown away by the talent that surrounds me every single day that I just get to bear witness to. I know that I was prepared. I know that one of the reasons they asked me to do it is because multiple pieces of the company felt that I could do the television and the writing and the reporting job. And that was really cool to feel rewarded in being seen, like your skill set is being seen. But there are so many people who are so very talented and work so very hard. And the luck piece does come in. Everybody I know who's successful in the journalism, sports, they have some sort of lucky break story. And this just so happened to be mine.
I could argue that it's luck coupled with a lot of factors.
Luck favors the prepared, as my dad says.
You've got the sayings. I'm not as good at coming with the sayings, but yes, I mean, I think that's it, right? It's what you do in the face of a no, what you do when you're, feeling beaten down. Yeah. Do you keep going? And eventually you hope that it breaks through, and it has. You have been the first in a lot of moments in your career. Too many to list, to be honest, but you're the first woman to host the NBA draft on ESPN 2022. I mean, you're in great company. You've got Doris Burke, who just very famously was the game analyst for a men's championship final. What is that like? Do you know going into these moments that you are the first woman, the first Black woman to do some of these things? How do you digest it?
Usually, yes, because I'm human. I see the headlines. Woj posted on his Instagram account when I became the first woman to host the NBA draft that he was proud and I was the first, and same for Doris. So I see these things, and it's equal parts. I'm so grateful for the opportunity. And I know that if it wasn't me, I'm just the culmination of so many women's hard work. So I read in Aurora James's book, Wildflower, recently. The phrase Black girl magic is absolutely true. The magic exists, but there's also a lot of Black women's hard work. And that's the shoulders that I stand on. So it just so happened to be me, and that I am the culmination of this moment in time where all the pieces fit together. But there were so many qualified women who pushed so that someone, and that someone was me, could be in that space. And so I definitely feel the weight of wanting to make sure that I help push things forward. And so that comes with a little bit of anxiety and nervousness about making sure I get it right, because I know that if I say a name wrong or a stat incorrectly, it's not because I made a mistake. It's because I'm a woman who didn't deserve to be there. And so I want to show up as my most excellent form so that it makes it easier and easier for the people that are coming behind me. But I will tell you, when I hosted the NBA draft for the first time, one of the first shots we did, it was so special because it was on the anniversary, the 50th anniversary of Title IX. And one of the first shots of the show was, yes, it was me hosting, but it was a 3-box, and it was me in the middle, and it was Shanae Ogumake and Monica McNutt. And it was like, it's not, I know today is a celebration of the first, but look around, because we're getting past the times of being the first and the only. We're going to be a collective. And as a collective, we go much farther than we do as individuals.
Speaks to my soul. It gives me chills. It's so true. I mean, you're a fixture in a lot of our households, NBA fan households, but it's just really because we've gotten to know each other personally. It's so rewarding to just watch you continue to move mountains. So it does come with a lot of pressure, I can imagine, because it represents what's possible to little girls, and it's magical. And so imagine in 20 years what that looks like, and in 40 years, and in 60. Like, there's just so much opportunity that I think you've unlocked through your career. So we've talked about a few of your mentors, but I'd love to hear about an incredible work friend.
I don't just have work friends, I have work wives. Shanae, Andrea Carter, Hillary Guy, Laura Rutledge. They're so delicious. I adore them.
When are you reaching out to them? What are you looking to them for?
Well, I'll talk about Laura specifically. She's my NFL counterpart. And so to see her sort of have this mirrored experience that I do in the NFL and the NBA, speaking of juggling, I mean, the woman juggles. She has 2 little kids. I don't know how she does it. And she does it with this grace and ease. We talked about this. I work hard. I'm like, I try hard. And I think try hard has been commandeered as a bad thing, but I've always been that. Like, I'm a little type A. Laura breezes into a room as if everything is just encyclopedic knowledge that she just knows. And she makes everything look so effortless and easy. And I know that that's not the case because I get to see little glimpses of the behind the scenes. I'll tell you a story about Laura real quick. So one day, this was in Bristol, Connecticut a couple of years ago. It was in 2020. The draft was virtual. And I had a bunch of wonderful, well-meaning male producers who just forgot to tell me about the green screen that I would be standing in front of for a virtual interviews with all of the players. And my dress blended in to the green screen, and I had traveled and I didn't have anything else. And I was having a little freak out about this hours before the show. And Laura had just gotten done, I think it was with NFL Live. And she said, "What's going on?" And I explained to her. She said, "I'll go home. I'll be back in a couple of minutes and I will bring And she came back and she brought 10 dresses for me to try on. And I picked one and she let me borrow it and wear it. And I was like, how am I going to get it back to you? Oh, just hang it up in a closet. I'll find it later. And she just I was going to be a floating head. And she just came in and was like, no. And by the way, we had met one time before that. So it was just the most kind thing. And she literally gave me the clothes essentially off of her back in order to help me.
That makes me so happy. I know her from afar. I love her.
She's the best.
She's really lovely.
So special.
I will, though, speak to, I think for all of us, it is high effort, and I think that we're all different personality types. Yeah. And so for me, certain things that might be stressful wouldn't be stressful for you and vice versa.
That's a good point.
So I think that is such a facade. Like everyone's working really hard, especially if you're a woman, especially if you're a woman of color. Like you are just overcoming odds that are stacked against you. And so, on the outside looking in, I think, the goal is for it to look effortless. I think for you, it does to me, but I think that that honest conversation around.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
No,
so tell myself a different story then.
It's effortful for me. That's for sure. My favorite part of the interview, would you rather?
Okay.
Would you rather get a case of the giggles or totally go blank on live television?
Get the case of the giggles.
I've seen this happen. What was that one that happened that I couldn't stop watching? Oh, it was when Kendra Perkins y'all thought he was asleep, but his screen was frozen.
Yeah.
Would you rather burn the midnight oil or start your day before sunrise?
I want to say start the day before sunrise, but burn the midnight oil.
I understand. Yeah, that's where I'm at as well.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest.
Would you rather fly only red eyes or fly only in the middle seat?
Only red eyes.
Oh, love that energy. I'm a red eye stan.
Yeah, I know. You're the red eye. You're a red eye warrior. And you keep going until like 2:00 and then you start to
start to fade for sure. Yep. Would you rather be the oldest person in the office or the youngest?
Oh, I've been the youngest, so I look forward to being the oldest.
Love
the wisdom that comes with it.
Would you rather be late to a meeting where you're presenting or where your boss is presenting?
Oh my gosh, late to it. Oh my gosh. I have you don't understand. I'm getting uncomfortable thinking about this. Where I'm presenting, I hope, is my boss there? I hope.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Where I'm presenting? Mm-hmm. This is all bad, Sally. Where I'm presenting, though.
Really?
I think so. Because at least it's on me and I get to take accountability for that. I want to show up for other people.
Yeah, I understand. I'm definitely where your boss is presenting. Really? I cannot show up late to something I'm presenting. It throws the whole thing.
This is neither an option. At that point, I'm just not coming. I'm just gonna die of embarrassment.
Oh, I thought it was tomorrow.
Yeah, what?
Would you rather be a mentor or a mentee?
Well, I think this is a trick question because I think you are inherently always both. But I'm going to say a mentee because I like to continue to learn.
Would you rather interview or be interviewed?
Interview. May I please take over this now?
I agree with that one. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
It's so good to see you. It's been way too long.
Wait.
Malika's hydrating for those of you at home, which is great. We accomplished our goal.
I have finished my goal, which was finishing one single 8-ounce glass of water over the course of this wonderful conversation. Yes.
For everyone at home, please make sure to stay hydrated.
Sally, thank you so much for having me.
This was so much fun. We didn't talk about the NBA and players and teams nearly enough, but we can get into that on our personal time.
That's not water, it's something else.
Thank you, Malika.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Work Friends, a podcast from Argent. Listen and follow on all podcast platforms and subscribe to the Argent YouTube channel for more clips and bonus content. Plus, email your work questions and dilemmas at workfriends@argentwork.com for a chance to have one of our amazing guests weigh in with advice. I'm Sally Christensen, and we'll see you next time. Work Friends. Work Friends is produced by Gina Marinelli with editing by Justin Kropp. Our theme music is by Karina De Piano and Melanie Naima.